afternoon and welcome. It's a pleasure to be here for the November meeting of the Massachusetts Board of Early Education and Care. I'm Noni Lissow, the chair. I first want to say that it's just a pleasure and a privilege to be here in Western Massachusetts, in Springfield, at the UMass Center. In particular, on behalf of the board members, want to thank the organization for hosting us and for Wesley Day's efforts to give us a great space for a really important and momentous meeting, actually. So welcome to those of you on the phone. I think we have Maura and Carolyn by phone. Anybody else by phone? Okay, so we will get started. In the interest of time, I'm not going to say too much to frame up the meeting, except that the meeting represents a lot of progress in terms of moving a number of items along that we have been focused on as a board. But big picture, I want to be very clear that the agenda item and the vote around rates represents an unprecedented increase and something for us all to celebrate. I want to thank the commissioner and the team for their tremendous work, both in responding to a really robust discussion and set of discussions that built from the October meeting, which built from the September meeting. And I want to then suggest not only should we celebrate that rate increase today as unprecedented and critical at this moment especially, but as you will hear in the motion, the work today also represents a deep commitment on the part of the agency and the board to collaborate around getting to a different way of capturing cost and therefore financing the system. So we hold two things together today to really drive the work forward in ways that I think is inspiring and really important. So thanks to everybody for coming today. Thank you to the commissioner and her team for this this set of agenda items, but especially this tremendous work on rates that represents not only on its own significant progress, but in the context of commitments and new strategies for modeling cost, represents the frontier of where the agency is headed. So with that, I will turn it over to the secretary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is this working? I guess it is. I can't really tell.
I know.
So just a couple of quick things. One is the legislature has passed a supplemental budget for sort of closing out FY22, but also appropriating significant funds that would be available for FY23, including $150 million more for the C3 program, thereby making it possible to extend that program hopefully through the end of the fiscal year. There are some, there was an unexpected earmark in there, which we're trying to understand in terms of how it affects the implementation of the C3 grants going forward. But nonetheless, certainly very gratified the legislature has come forward with the additional funds that are federal dollars that just needed state appropriation in order to make them available to us. So very good news on that front. There were some things that weren't in this budget. There were not additional funds for safety investments and equipment and training that was proposed by the governor. The proposal for supporting essentially down payments and refinancings for family child care was not included. Funds for an innovation fund were not included. I think the good news, I think, is, as we'll hear later, is that all of these things find their way into the memo that's talking about the FY24 budget proposal. So even though it's disappointing that those are not in the current SUP, there's hope that nonetheless there will be an opportunity to include those dollars going forward. And then separately, since our last meeting, data was released by the U.S. Department of Education on the National Assessment of Educational Progress, which was actually very consistent with our state MCAS data, especially with regard to fourth grade reading and math. The data, unfortunately, shows a continued decline in those results. It's consistent. Massachusetts results are consistent with what's going on nationally, so we're not an outlier. In fact, Massachusetts continues to be #1 in the country on the NAEP scores when you look at them across subjects and grade levels. Nonetheless, it's discouraging that the data continues to go down, and that the amount of recovery that is going to be necessary in order to get back not just to 2019 pre-COVID levels, but back to levels that we saw as recently as 2013 will require significant effort on all of our parts. And obviously that's true in the K-12 world and elementary education in particular, but obviously also with significant implications for the work that we're doing here in early education and care. Just a couple of things to note. Not surprisingly, the average masks more significant declines in other communities, high-need communities around the state. And there's actually some work that was done by Tom Kane at the Harvard Graduate School of Education, which attempted to sort of translate the NAEP data down to the district level based on some analysis involving the state assessment, or MCAS. And what we saw, unfortunately, through that analysis is that in math, some districts saw declines, or as it was calculated at least, lost learning time of up to almost a year, and in reading, something closer to 2/3 of a year. That's a significant loss, a significant challenge, a significant missed learning opportunity that somehow we need to make back through accelerated efforts, through extra time, through additional strategies that have hopefully a strong basis in evidence to suggest that we can move those young children back to where they need to be by the time they're in middle school, and certainly by the time they're in high school. But it's a multi-year process. It's going to require effort. It's going to require investment. And this data just confirms, unfortunately, what we probably already knew. But there's a lot of work to be done, and I'm looking forward to getting at it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Secretary. Commissioner, these mics, by the way, are for the benefit of the live stream.
Okay.
The room is not mic'd.
Okay, well, hopefully live stream here. And also just recognizing and welcoming Dr. Schoenwald to the...
Oh, right. Welcome, Dr. Schoenwald. So we have Maura Siegel, Allison Schoenwald, Carolyn Kane on the phone. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to start by just thanking the UMass Amherst Springfield Center for hosting us today, and obviously as a parent of 2 UMass students, go Minutemen. I'm especially happy to be here at this site, and also my thanks to Wesley Days and also the Springfield Regional Office, who I think is pretty well represented, not just in the room, but by their baked goods at the back of the room, which is a signature of theirs, and will be available during the break for anyone here who's here in attendance. I want to start by making 3 really exciting personnel announcements for the agency. We've been hard at work identifying new capacity and bringing in and recruiting talent to do the work of the agency, our core services, as well as many of the new initiatives. And I want to introduce you to Tyrese Nicholas, who's here today. And she is our new Deputy Commissioner for Family Access and Engagement, and we are thrilled to have her heading up this brand new division at the agency, really to lead the work around engaging our families and elevating the family voice. Tyrese joins us most recently from the Department of Transitional Assistance, where she led some of their employment efforts, and has always been an advocate and a passionate sort of passionate bureaucrat to put the voice and the experience of families at the center of their work. So welcome, Tyrese. We are so looking forward. She started yesterday. I'm also very happy to introduce Hajai Shahir, who also joined us yesterday and is our new Associate Commissioner for Family and Community Support. He'll be overseeing our CFCE grants, as well as really engaging families in the work of the agency, whether it's policy practice training, licensing. So while he's be overseeing that grant program, his responsibilities are much broader in terms of the way the agency engages in the family experience. He also comes with a breadth and depth of inside and outside government experience, engaging families, bringing the principles of early childhood education into community work, and leading a lot of fatherhood work, which is why I first met Hajai. So we're so happy to have you and welcome you to the team. not here, I don't think, but Amy Whitehead-Plow. Very happy that she'll be also joining our new Family Access and Engagement team as the director of the Head Start Collaboration Office, which is a really essential function in the agency to make sure that our community work is connected to all of our partners and early education providers. So she's been at the agency for 6 years as our director of program quality, and we're thrilled that she has agreed to transition into this new leadership role. So welcome to that role, Amy. We continue to build, and we sent you, and for those of you at home and here, we have a number of positions posted, and we continue to build capacity in our budget and fiscal team, on our programs team, in licensing, project management, and most recently posted a new position for supervisor of applied behavioral analysis programs as we begin the journey to build the capacity of the agency to do that work. So we welcome your interest in the agency and hope you'll share it with your networks as well. I also wanted to mention the closeout budget. So we are absolutely thrilled that $150 million was included in that closeout budget. And just to reiterate that we are still analyzing the impact of new language in that and should have more information soon as we await the governor's action on that legislation. I also wanted to mention that the closeout budget included another $315 million for the High Quality Early Education and Care Affordability Trust, bringing that trust to about $490 million, and we are just excited by the opportunity and support that that represents for the system building work we are collectively engaged in around work. We are still working apace on modernizing our background record check system. As we updated you last time, we've met our federal compliance deadline. We've also migrated all of our family child care providers into the new updated modern system, and having so far very good experience with quicker times for approval of assistance and also family child care providers, all with the goal of trying to make sure that we're speeding up the time from when a candidate is identified to the time that they can be in a classroom, and I hope everyone is having some of that. The next frontier for our background record check work is our residential and placement staff. So we are really excited to be moving forward to move the residential approval process into the more modern, quicker background record check process, and we hope to have that executed over the next several months. So really grateful to the team and their work for that. Finally, we announced last week that we were using agency discretion to enable programs who participate in the state subsidized child care system to be able to close during the week between Christmas and New Year's. This is something that's happened over the last couple years, and a recognition that it is really hard out there right now. Many programs are operating short staff, trying to meet the needs of the families that are on their waiting lists, moving around classrooms, and just in recognition of the work the field has done over the last several years, we wanted to try and provide an option for programs to close during that week without fear of losing financial support from the agency. So we don't direct whether programs should stay open or close, but we are providing that opportunity without financial penalty, and we expect programs to be working out with their families the best way to make sure for any families that need access that week that substitute care can be provided, and we're here to assist in that effort. Finally, I just wanted to say our December meeting will take place at our Milk Street offices. So we've kind of alternating between our field and also our Boston office. And at the conclusion of that meeting, we will have an opportunity to recognize Chair Lizotte and her amazing years of service on the board and some other outgoing members. So for those of you who would like to join us following the December board meeting, we'll be having low-key,
Very low-key.
a very low-key,
Short.
as promised, reception to recognize the really remarkable years of service that you've had, Chair Lizotte, and we look forward to doing that at next month's meeting as well. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Wait, I forgot the headline. Sorry. We are very excited to announce that yesterday we submitted the preschool development grant application that we mentioned last month. This is a funding opportunity made available for states who have previously participated in a planning effort, and Massachusetts was eligible. It's a federal opportunity, collaboration between the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Department of Education. It is a 3-year grant with the opportunity for $12 million over each year for 3 years, and is a system-building effort around early childhood education in the states. And the team who worked on it, both internal and external, the state government, did an amazing job, really outlining what we hope will be an accelerant for the work that we've been talking about. So the idea is to really use the opportunity of this system-building grant to move our efforts around family access, around workforce, and around quality theories of action. So really looking forward to hopefully reporting back. We should know by the end of December the outcome of that grant. And again, just recognizing Jocelyn Bound and Amy Checkaway and the team that worked on that. And we look forward to reporting back on the outcome of that process. Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
As someone who's written a lot of grants, I just want to give a round of applause because I know.
78 pages.
How is this question different from that question? I know. Nice work. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Commissioner. So we are really pleased to have some public comment today at this meeting. We have traditionally sort of said 2 to 3 minutes, and I'll call out the person who is up and the person who is on deck, and we'll have, this is really great chance to be in dialogue. So I want to thank you all for coming. We're going to start with Laura. I'm not going to try the last name. Maybe Frogamini? Frogamini. Okay. Laura Frogamini from the Northampton Public Schools with Anna Fernandez on deck. Thank you, Laura. Welcome.
Is someone here timing?
Sure, I can do that.
Because I didn't bring
Yes, yes.
Just
Great.
keep it efficient.
Thank you.
So I am Laura Frogamini, the Preschool and Partnership Coordinator in the Northampton Public Schools. We have a CFCE grant, a CPPI grant, a Summer Step-Up grant. And I'm here to thank you. I've worked for EEC programs for decades. And then I was hired by the public schools to coordinate the preschool partnership. And I think that was a key to some of the successes that we've had, is that we had someone who had worked in the EEC field for a long time. What was awkward was that I all of a sudden had access to state benefits. So now, instead of, with my EEC roles, paying 80% of my family's health insurance, I was laughing in the city HR. He's like, nobody laughs here. I'm like, but are you sure it's not 80% of my individual plan? It's 80% of my family plan? So just that made such a significant difference. And yet I'm working with the EEC programs and I feel guilty all the time. And as I want to thank you for engaging KPMG in the process of working and understanding and listening about the voucher system. The session I attended was phenomenal in being alongside these providers and community action enrollment specialists who so beautifully didn't just sit with the frustration, but really talked about the mechanics of the system and had incredible system analysis to share. And one of the things we also talked about was, if we're receiving voucher funding in our family child care and EEC programs, and Massachusetts is committed to the mixed delivery system, aren't they essentially state workers? And can we find a way to bring them into the state benefit system? Because even if you didn't change, and really from my EEC program to because I could be Director 1 licensed and hired by the public schools, my salary actually didn't change that first year. But my family's situation changed incredibly. And so please consider that. And it could even be a percentage if your program takes 50% of the vouchers or whatever. But please consider it. One of the things I lost in joining the public schools was access to the background record check system and the navigator. So it's been challenging as the public school person to get our itinerant special education people cleared, though had the remarkable experience of having someone cleared in a day. So that was amazing last week. So as we think about that, I have to go asking, okay, would you take a turn running them? Would you take a turn running them? And I'm going to 14 different programs asking, when really what I want to be able to do is provide a smooth and effective service where I've cleared them. So I would love to get that access back. Thank you for the partnership grants that allow us to work in community and coordinated collaboration. The CFCE grant and the CPPI grant working together. We have our home visitors talking to our itinerant special education folks like, oh, so-and-so might need her child screened. Oh, I know Rebecca. It'll be okay. Let me introduce you to her. The warm handoff between agencies and between special education delivery has been incredible. I just have to say thank you, Jocelyn, for the first year that we had the CPPI grant. She really walked us through not restricting ourselves to replicating the public school model in community-based programs, but really thinking about what are EEC programs like and what do they need, and how can we not say, okay, yeah, you have to move all the special ed kids to one room in this community program like we do in the public. So we're now able to serve over 50%, I think we just hit 54% of our preschoolers with disabilities in Northampton are served in community-based programs by the itinerant team. We're in 14 schools, and I think it's over, I can't remember how many classrooms. Again, the CFCE grant and the CPPI grant working together with Summer Step Up, covering that out-of-school time. We focus specifically on English language learners and making sure in children with disabilities that they were getting that extended time in order to be catching up, as you so beautifully talked about. So we really, these things together, thank you. Really reaching the coordinated family and community, and the support that we are getting from Flo House, from Kathy Lang, from Jay Swanson has been incredible. And was that thank you that I'm done?
Yep,
Yeah,
we're at about
perfect. Thank you.
Ana Fernandez with Ana Diaz on deck. Or maybe you're together from the same organization, I think. Welcome.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm Ana Fernandez.
I'm Ana Diaz.
And, I work for Valley Opportunity Council in Churchill. I've been there for 6 years. I used to do preschool, but now I do infant and toddlers. I enjoy it. It's very fun. I love working with the kids. I'm a student at Springfield College, getting my bachelor's. I have 1 more year to go. It's been very difficult trying to get ends meet, trying to pay student loans, with the salaries not being the way it should be. But it's been a very difficult situation with that. But with the kids, it's been very fun with working with the infants and toddlers. It's been a little struggle because we've had a lot of challenging with the kids, having them come in, having them have therapists come in because of some of them need a lot of services. So they've been having a lot of therapists come in once or twice a week, having to have them have their services. So it's been, very difficult. But we've been working on that, trying to make them feel comfortable, having the therapist be able to do the therapies that they need, and having the children get the services that they need. My coworker and I do our best in giving them, but also giving the parents the support that they need as well. Some of the parents are single parents. Some of them try to find ways to help their children because they don't know. Sometimes they feel like they're drowning. So we try to give them the best that they can give their children. And as a teacher, that's what we try to do. Give our parents the services and try to give them the support that they need.
Hi, my name is Ana Diaz. I also work at VOC Churchill Center. I've been working at VOC for 3.5 years. I work with toddlers. I'm also a single mother of 3 daughters. One comes here to Springfield and 2 go to the charter school. I also study at Springfield College, and I also have to pay my loans. I have 9 kids in my classroom. 5 of them have
IEPs.
IEP. And sometimes the parents talk to us, right? And they express like they're struggling, like us, and like most of the staff, you know, they are single parents and they also have the struggle. Yeah, and I think that's everything.
Thank you both for your extraordinary work and for all that you're doing and for coming to talk to us about just how many balls are in the air, how much you're juggling, and how many competing demands on your time and your energy. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Steve Huntley with Kim Dion on deck.
Good afternoon. I'm Steve Huntley, Executive Director of VOC, and I just want to thank Anna and Anna for coming out and really putting their story out there and putting themselves out
Yeah.
for everyone to see. It took a lot of courage for them to leave their comfort zone and come to this room. I really appreciate what they do. We had several others signed up to come and speak to you and share their stories as well. It's a similar tone. Unfortunately, short staffing limited the number of folks that were able to come out today. Let me start by thanking you all for traveling west for this board meeting. I appreciate being in my office till about 12:15 and then coming to an EEC board meeting. That was terrific. I also want to thank the board for listening to both Dawn DeStefano from Square One and I last month about the inequality and having EEC look at some other options and punting it for a month to really think about other fairer options that could be done as this resource comes in to effect. And I'd like to thank EEC and their staff for taking that seriously and sharpening their pencils to find an additional 0.75% increase for Region 1. And to be coming, Meryl is here. Meryl is the VOC, I should have asked her title. I don't know. She's our quality guru. That's what I call her. So she's going to be talking a little bit later about the quality at VOC. And with this change of allocation, with this increase that's coming, the 10% plus or minus, there's still a major east-west inequality in our rate. I appreciate you mentioning that and acknowledging it and committing to further solve it. And time's of the essence. Really, we have 7 months until we're thinking about next fiscal year already. It's already November. It doesn't feel it, but it is. So we really need to get going and get that. My last 21 years at VOC, I've been at VOC for 21 years. I've spent a great deal of time and financial creativity to improve quality in all our programs. So my philosophy has been, it has to be good enough for me. Our housing units have to be good enough for me to live in. Our child care centers have to be good enough for me to send my children to. So we've invested substantially in quality, sometimes against what is going on in the greater funding world. We've invested in commercial properties that generate revenues. We have a lot of non-traditional things that allow us to have high quality in all of our programs. So we literally have grown from church basements and places that I didn't feel cool walking in and out of, quite honestly, to state-of-the-art centers. And I'd invite you all to come see any of them. Maybe that invitation should have been a month ago when you were planning your day, but certainly I'd invite you all to come see our state-of-the-art centers. We've invested significantly, and we continue to invest significantly in women like Anna and 140 other VOC employees that work really hard all day, working with some of the most difficult children, challenged children in the state. A year ago, VOC entered into a competition to become the operator of the Gorse Center at Mount Holyoke College. The college was committed to changing the contract as the current provider would not accept subsidized children, resulting in the college providing care for only 2 campus families. The rest of those were affluent children in and around the South Hadley community. The team that underwent the review of proposals included parents, school finance department, school HR members, and faculty members from education and psychology department. The college reported back that there were 12 qualified proposals, mostly from those that don't accept subsidized children. VOC was awarded the contract to be operator, and as we debriefed about our application, the faculty members expressed, again, faculty from education and psychology expressed they were able to easily identify elements of quality in our centers that they toured as they walked through them. Elements that include appropriate care for children with special needs and victims of trauma. It's no coincidence that we have focused on those two elements over the past 5 years. Secretary Pizer acknowledged what's going on in the greater post-COVID world as well with MCAS and things like that. The children in Region 1 deserve a chance as they enter kindergarten to be equals to their economically advantaged peers, rather than have a second-class future with rates that really belong in church basements with volunteers taking care, because that's what our rates cover right now. They don't cover high-quality programs. So thank you all for your time, and again, thank you for coming out west.
Thank you, Steve. Kim Dion with Merrill Michelli on board.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
My name's Kim Dion. I'm the Assistant Vice President for Seven Hills Child Care Resources. We're the CCR&R that serves both Central and Western Massachusetts. Welcome to Springfield. I'm here on behalf of the Massachusetts Child Care Resource and Referral Network. First, we want to thank Commissioner Kershaw and the EEC staff for getting out our most recent amendment so quickly to us. Our agencies really appreciated that. We're looking forward to engaging soon regarding the additional $5 million that the legislature designated to come to the CCR&Rs to help parents navigate our very complex subsidy system. The CCR&Rs are committed to supporting families in their search for quality and affordable childcare that meets their individual needs. This includes understanding their options in terms of accessing childcare subsidy. In some cases, it might mean a conversation about discussing their eligibility for those that are affiliated with DTA or DCF, their immediate eligibility for subsidy. But in other cases, it may mean a deeper conversation about eligibility to be placed on the state wait list and how to stay active on the wait list while they're waiting for that funding availability letter to be sent to them. My agency, Seven Hills, is currently working with EEC and the Governor's Office on a pilot project to help identify barriers as families try to find their way through our very complicated system. We're excited about the possibility of EEC using data gathered from this pilot to inform future policy development that results in changed and simplified processes for families, and our network stands ready to assist in any way possible. We also look forward to expanding our ability to work with child care providers. There is a large pool of providers who do not accept child care vouchers. Our network spends time each week working with those programs to help them understand the intricacies of accepting child care subsidy. And we also spend a lot of time each week with current subsidy providers, answering questions and providing technical assistance around both policies and billing so that they can continue to accept child care vouchers. So we look forward to working with Commissioner Kershaw and the EEC staff around the parameters of this new navigation program soon. Thank you.
Fabulous, thank you. I think we'll hear more about some of that today, in fact.
Absolutely.
Kim could lend 40 seconds to Merrill. Merrill Michelli's up with Jillian Boudin on deck. You're the quality guru.
It's a big shoes to fill.
It's great. Welcome.
Thank you. So my name is Merrill Michelli. I'm the education coordinator at Valley Opportunity Council, and I have been with VOC since May of this year. And I have the privilege of working with directors and educators like Anna Fernandez and Anna Diaz, who you just met, at all of our 8 center-based programs. My job is to support program quality, and that's what I'd like to focus on today: quality and a more equitable voucher reimbursement rate for Western Massachusetts. Quality is a term that we use very often in our field. We want and we expect high quality of care for all children, as we should. We expect early childhood classrooms to be filled with qualified educators, as we should. And we put numerous measures in place to assess and quantify quality. In fact, my 2 colleagues who just shared their own testimony who work at Churchill Homes talk about quality. Churchill Homes just received flying colors and reviews from their NACCE reaccreditation visit, most notably from me, a 96% in their quality of relationships. What we also know is that quality is intertwined with care. What does a high-quality early child environment look like? It is one that is lovingly created and cared for with children's interest and development in mind. And what is high-quality teaching? It is a teacher who approaches every day, every child with warmth and consistency and care. Quality emerges from care. So if we as a state hold our programs and our educators to high quality of standards, which we very much do, then it is imperative that our educators, who are the key to said quality, are cared for. Each day I think about my work in terms of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. My work is at the top of the pyramid by collaborating with educators like Anna and Anna in creative and cognitively challenging ways. Yet I remind myself every day to be conscious of the foundation of Maslow's hierarchy. Because according to the Massachusetts of Early Education workforce findings published in 2020, the average center-based educator in Massachusetts makes $15.75 per hour, and approximately 1/3 of our early education workforce depends on government benefits. Numbers like these tell me that the foundation of the pyramid is likely faulty, because there are significant risks to housing and food insecurity, as well as other physiological and psychological risk factors. I also know that pervasive stressors like these result in toxic stress, and toxic stress impacts not only the person coping with it, but the children in their care. So we are at a place in our state, a historic moment, where there is excellent forward momentum for investing in early education and care and our early educators. But this change cannot come swift enough. We just lost 2 teachers from the same classroom yesterday because they are tired and burned out and underpaid. And so how can we talk about quality? It is vital that Western Massachusetts receive a fair share for the voucher reimbursement rate. It will be an important first step toward care for our educators. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Jillian Budine? Something else? Welcome.
Welcome, and welcome to Western Mass. We love having you out here. And I just wanted to also say thank you to the EEC board members, Secretary Pizer and Commissioner Kershaw, and also welcome to Tyrese and Haji. I look forward to meeting you and getting to know you better. My name is Gillian Bedine. I've worked with the CFC grant and the what used to be community partnerships, family network, different funding with the EEC for 26 years, something like that. And locally, we call our CFCE program the Community Network for Children program. And our priority communities are Irving, Leverett, New Salem, Wendell, and Shutesbury. 5 tiny little towns, population, one of them is about 900 people. And we also support families in neighboring towns in a community because we all share support and resources. Today, I'd like to speak to how CFC programs meet the priorities of the CFCE grant, support families as their child's first teacher through Ages and Stages questionnaire, developmental screenings, welcome baby visits, family outreach, literacy enrichment, family referrals to EI, basic needs support, childcare, collaborate with private programs and public schools, support families in crisis, and more. CFC programs have been a crucial hub of support and resources for families, especially in our small rural communities. The options for early care and education programs for families to access have become more limited in our rural communities as across the state. With limited access to programs, many families at home rely on CFC programs to provide enrichment, socialization, and opportunities to reduce isolation through trusted relationships with CFCE program staff. CFC programs are the local and trusted web of support, with warm handoffs, builders of relationships, and partners that can support EEC with family engagement in meeting the goals of the EEC strategic plan. Please make sure to include CFCEs in this work. Engage the CFCEs in the work to strengthen our community's capacity to meet the needs of families. As we strive to maintain and build capacity within our communities to engage and support families, we recognize that we cannot do so without additional financial support. The CFCE grant has been reduced or level funded for the last 9 years. Please ensure that the web that supports and engages our families, programs, and partners in our community can continue to be strong and resilient as an EEC-funded program. As I end my testimony, I'd like to share a few comments from families participating in our programs. One comment is, without the CNC, my family would not have met some of our now closest friends, visited libraries in adjacent towns, spoken with parents about issues we're experiencing so openly. The CNC has made me a part of the community and allowed me to help be part of it. My family looks forward to Families Connecting Sessions, a family support program. We always learn something and leave feeling refreshed and renewed. Another family said, "My son and I have been attending CNC programs since he was a few months old. He now has a fondness for music and stories. During the pandemic, we've been so grateful to have a welcoming environment to attend, learn, and grow. Without the CNC programs, my son wouldn't have had the opportunity at his young age to listen to live guitar, singing as a group, read alouds, and exploration. Thank you for this incredible opportunity." Do I have time for one more? Do I have time for one more? Sure. Okay. Working with CNC has been incredible throughout the time we have been involved. From my last trimester of pregnancy to current days, our daughter being one, our daughter has learned so much and is quite advanced as a result of this program and what it offers. The staff is beyond amazing, from communication within the groups to one-on-one interactions. It truly feels as if this has made a difference in our lives, community, and beyond. That being said, it feels as if the world needs the ladies and their affiliates to continue making an incredible impact in today's world. So I'll leave you with that. And thank you for taking the time to listen. And I also want to say thank you to the CFCE staff within EEC, which provide us with lots of support, and the relationships that we've had over the years have been incredible. So thank you.
Thank you for your great work. Thanks so much for coming today. Okay, we'll turn now to our routine business. I want to welcome Nikki Ruiz de Lizarriaga on the phone as well. So we have before us the minutes from the October 11th meeting in Boston. Any edits, amendments? Otherwise, we'll vote on those minutes. Okay, I make the motion that we approve the minutes of the October 11th, 2022 meeting. Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you, Paul.
Second.
Carolyn. Thank you. All right, let's just go. We'll start in the room and then we'll move to the phone. Maria Moeller.
Yes.
Paul Belcito.
Yes.
Jamela Lee.
Yes.
Allison Schoenwald.
Yes.
Maura Siegel.
Yes.
Carolyn Kane.
Yes.
Nikki Ruiz de Luzuriaga.
Yes.
Thank you. Approved.
Can I vote? Madam
Oh,
Chair?
sorry.
I really want to vote
I
on
don't
these
know what
minutes.
that was about.
They're excellent minutes. and so
Secretary
I vote yes
Pizer.
enthusiastically.
2 votes. Go ahead. Thank you. Sorry about that. Okay, I'm going to turn now to Maria, who is chair of the new workforce working group. And we had our second meeting recently, and Maria will talk about that.
Thank you. So I'll read the quick
Sorry.
report for them. The Workforce Working Group met
I missed that part.
and focused on just one of the 3 strategies that they are prioritizing on this group, specifically the public outreach campaign. So on Wednesday, November 2nd, the Workforce Working Group met to discuss direction and brainstorm a potential public outreach campaign. The meeting built upon previous conversations we have had on board meetings about the need to develop a strategy to uplift the field, encourage others to join the early education field, and share the importance of early education. With so many opportunities and areas to potentially focus on, we began with a conversation thinking through key audiences, important messaging, and what calls to action can look like. EEC will continue to work on the background research and planning for our next steps for future discussions with the working group and the board. So we look forward to sharing updates on this project in the future.
Thank you, Maria. Anything to add from folks who were in the meeting as well?
If I can just add real quick, and this is really in response to the testimony earlier, Anna, thank you, because your testimony directly impacts the work that this group is doing, and so just thank you for sharing what your thoughts are on the day-to-day challenges and the fun that you have at the same time with your students, because it really is the reason why this is a priority, and we'll take that testimony to heart as we continue to focus on that work, so thank you.
Thanks again. Maura, did you want to add anything on the workforce working group?
No.
Okay.
No.
Great. Thanks so much. Okay, let's move to one other item of routine business. The agency annually submits a report to the Secretary of Education, the Secretary of Administration and Finance, and the clerks of the House of Representatives and Senate, who then forward that on to the Joint Committee on Education. And the purpose of the report is to document the progress of the agency towards its goals and its strategic activity, as well as some of its activity that's specific to that year. So what we looked at was a report of the year 2021, which of course took us back to what was probably the most exceptional year of the agency in at least its history. And I did want to just say that for me, it was a chance to just remind ourselves of the tremendous work that went on at the agency through the pandemic, placing the workforce and children and families at the very, very center. It was a moment to both do tactical work on the ground, but also to orient the strategic work even more towards the priorities. And some of you will remember we had a strategic plan that was days old, or so it felt, at the moment the pandemic hit. And it ended up being, with credit to the organization, a guiding set of principles by which to do the work, and not to see COVID as a crisis over here where we just do different kind of work and respond to it, but instead take some of those guiding principles and some of those priorities and place them at the core. And of course, in so doing, place the workforce and children and families at the center. So I just wanted to take a moment, because I think it's easy to forget just what that was like. And I know firsthand for the team just what tremendously, tremendously hard work and creative thinking went on in the moment through the crisis. So just wanted to recognize that. It was a real walk back in time, I must say, but also very heartening to see how strategic a lot of the work really was. Anything else from folks?
Yeah. To say, Madam Chair, I have the unique opportunity to work with the team to develop a report for a time period in which I was not at the agency, but I was struck by many of the same things that you said, and asked us to share it broadly among the staff. It represents such a tremendous amount of creativity and hard work and responsiveness to the field. So we are proud to present the annual report from that time period for the board's consideration.
Thank you. Other comments from the board before we vote?
I just wanted to say that I thought the report was very well written, and I appreciate all the effort that was made.
Thank you, Carolyn. Okay, a long motion. Here we go. I make the motion that the Board of Early Education and Care, in accordance with General Law, Chapter 15D, Section 3G, hereby approves and adopts the annual legislative report for calendar year 2021, and will forward the report to the Secretary of Education, the Secretary of Administration and Finance, and the clerks of the House of Representatives and Senate, who shall forward the same to the Joint Committee on Education. Could I have a second, please?
Second.
Thank you, Jamila. Jamila Lee?
Yes.
Paul Belcido?
Yes.
Secretary, it's going to you, so do you vote?
All right. I'm very supportive of it. Whether I should recuse myself or not, I'll leave it to the attorneys. But if I were to vote, I would vote yes.
Okay. Maria Moeller?
Yes.
Allison Schoenwald?
Yes.
Carolyn Kane?
Yes.
Maura Siegel?
Yes.
Nikki Ruiz de la Zuriaga?
Yes.
Thank you. approved, and we'll look forward to that being submitted. So thank you very much for putting that together.
Thank you to the board, and again, recognition to the staff who helped draft the report, but really whose work was represented in that report.
Great. Okay, so we'll turn now to our main items for discussion and action, and in this case, we will start by picking up directly on our October meetings and discussion. I know we've all said this in some way, shape, or form, but I think this is a moment for, to recognize sometimes it's great to iterate and have discussion and get to something even stronger, and I think we heard themes of that. And I think at the same time, this represents a moment where two things can be very true at once. The first is this is unprecedented, and I think I don't want to lose that piece in all of this. And at the same time, there is a strong and deep and dogged commitment to doing even better by how we do the financing. So I'll turn it over to the commissioner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me ask Greg Norfleet and Carol Miyanoyama to join us up here for the questions that will no doubt be way over my head at some point. Okay. So as we mentioned, based on your feedback at the last meeting and the public testimony, the team went back, went out and came back in. We heard some very specific feedback from all of you. Is there more we could do for everybody? Is there some timelines that you might put on yourselves around getting out of this market rate survey business and thinking about a different alternative approach? Are there some things we might do in the intervening years before we have to submit a new market rate survey to be able to take a different approach as well? And so I just want to recognize that the team in working, we took a careful look at how we produced both the options and the outcome and the results last time, and kind of went back out and reapplied in a different order how we might do rate increases. So thinking about how we might apply some across the board rate increases first, so that we could reach more people before we were doing targeted increases. And so so just reminding everyone of the sort of restrictions that the agency is operating under. This is a very complicated year for us to be putting out a rate increase. We have the market rate survey was due this year, and that is a year when the federal government does expect us to use the findings of those to inform a rate increase. We are fully expecting, and at your direction, we went back and had another conversation with our federal partners who reiterated that there will likely be a threshold this year, and that they will expect it to have progress over the last time where they sent a threshold of 25%. And then we had further sort of state framework, a rate reserve line item language, limiting the rate reserve to center-based programs, and also requesting that 2020 line item language directing us to have some discretion over a 20 million part of the rate reserve, but requiring that 40 million of that be done as a quality add-on rather than go into the basic published rate. So in addition to sort of understanding all the various constraints that the agency was operating on, and really feeling very strongly that the agency needed to be able to respond to what we will anticipate our findings from the federal government regarding our overall rates, we were able to develop a revised proposal. And before I walk through it, I do want to say that I think this is actually the board, agency, and external partners working in the best possible way. We put our heads together, we came up with a proposal. You asked us hard questions, you gave us guidance on how we might think and look differently. We got input from the public about that proposal, and then we went back and we're coming back with a revision. So I think this revision it is not on order of magnitude, a lot different because of all those constraints that we have, but I do think it is simpler, more straightforward, and does allow us to get additional resources to almost everybody across the state in their rates. So first, starting with the center-based programs, we're proposing a 10% across the board increase. 1.5% of that will go into the published rates, and 8.5% pursuant to line item language will be done as a quality add-on, but it will be experienced as a rate increase in terms of how the programs receive their funding. We also are able to provide additional targeted increases to those age groups and regions where we're not at the 30th percentile. So an across the board of about 10% is what programs will feel, in addition to some regions and rates being adjusted up to that 30th percentile, which is what we hope the federal government were set as a threshold, so we're not back with you talking about additional funds needed. On our family child care side, we're proposing a comparable rate increase of 10% across the board that we are recommending be included in the published base rate for family child care providers going forward into this year, plus again, that targeted increase to get those rates that are not at the 30th percentile up to that rate increase. In addition, we pay an add-on rate to our providers who serve our families involved with the Department of Children and Families, our young parent families, and our families experiencing homelessness. And so we're recommending a $1 increase in that add-on from 22 to 23. The total package is about the same in terms of cost from last month, about 80 million total, and we will be recommended, or I should say now, because the maintenance budget for 24 has been submitted, we are recommending that all of these rate increases be fully annualized into next year, into the ongoing rates, both in center and family child care, as well as the supportive add-on. The timeline remains the same, thankfully, to the hard work of the team, that we anticipate rates being available in December for the November billing, and they will all be retroactive to July 1st. So although we won't be able to pay them out until December, they will go back to July 1st for the full year. We have updated, should I stop there and see if there are questions, Madam Chair? Do you want?
Sure. Any questions, clarification, otherwise? Anybody on the phone, feel free to jump in if you have a question.
This is Maura. I'm just actually going back to the slide from the October meeting to just do a compare and contrast, but I was hoping maybe you could narrate very concretely what's the difference.
Sure. I guess from family terms, we are still making sure that families have access to the 30th percentile or 30% at least in every region of the providers that are in there, that are in the communities where they live and work. From the provider perspective, we were able to get additional funding. So originally we had proposed a 0.68 across the board for centers, plus the 8.5 similar percentage for family child care. So by applying the rate increases in a different order, we effectively were able to capture additional funds to apply that across the board amount first, which meant we could give more for everybody. And then the amount we would need to bring everyone up to the 30th was slightly lower. So we also, instead of organizing it by the funding allocation, we organized it by provider type, which is a little bit in the presentation, but I think makes it a little easier for us to present and understand. And more, we do have, the rest of the slides do update the data and analysis. So the impact of this new revised recommendation on rates, and we can pause for additional questions, or I can have Greg and Carol walk a little bit through just the update on what the impact looks like from, okay.
Okay. So thank you again, and to second the commissioner, I do think that we did end up with a better result than where we were last month, so thank you all for your feedback and the opportunity to come back to you all. The main difference of how we applied this was that previously we got everybody up to the 30th percentile and then added a across-the-board increase of 0.68. In this situation, instead, we did a 1.5% increase for everyone, and then anyone who wasn't at the 30th percentile then brought them up. So as you can see in the charts in front of you, slide 10 gives this will be the published rate chart of the increase that you'll see from.
Just tell me which slide you want, sorry.
Oh, slide 10. So that's the one right before that one. That one, yep. So this is this will end up being a published rate chart that's reflective of the percentile for each region and age type. As you can see, just with the 1.5% increase, and then strategic increases for regions. We are able to get above the 30th percentile for all regions in our published rates. Additionally, on the next slide, we present what the additional 8.5 across the board increase will look like in terms of the percentiles achieved by each region and age group.
So that 8.5 will bring, it's not going to end up in the published rate because of the line item language and implementing as a quality add-on, but you can see as it is applied, it actually does bring up the rates quite a bit in terms of their percentiles.
The remainder of the slides actually walk through a little bit more detail. I'm not going to go through each one in a lot of depth, but the way to read this is the first column gives you the base rate for FY22, then applying a 1.5% increase, and then the cell that is highlighted represents which one we would choose because it's the higher of the two values. So if 1.5% gets you above the 30th percentile, that will be your rate. If it's below the 30th percentile, we'll bring you up to the 30th percentile. We then present a FY23 base rate along with the year-over-year change percentage. The blue columns are related to the 8.5% add-on. So the additional across-the-board increase in dollar terms. Then within the green box, we give the total difference in rates from FY22 to FY23, the total percentage change for both the published and the 8.5% quality add-on, and the rate that you'll experience in the field in FY23 with the 10% increase.
And here's what it looks like for family childcare.
And you'll notice the big difference here, and I'm seeing an error in our table that should be value after a 10% increase. The difference between these is that we are applying just a 10% increase for the FCCs instead of separating into the two separate increases.
One typo with all of the complicated, well, we will fix
stick
that
with
and repost, but understandable, absolutely. So we didn't think we should spend too much time on the updated, but it is already publicly posted. So if folks are interested in looking kind of at the details, and again, we'll fix anything that needs to be fixed. But just a quick reminder to the board that what we talked about last time still stands, which is we are using the market rate survey this time as required by our federal partners and oversight agency. But we have a longer term strategy, both in terms of the rates that families that we pay to our subsidized providers, and that represents access for families, but also in terms of our broader financing strategy and how it relates to Commonwealth Cares for Children and the other kinds of programs that we think really need to fund the sector. As you recall, big takeaway from the market rate survey, all of our comments, we are not going to rates our way into a stably financed early education and care system. So it's going to take us working creatively and thinking about a broader financing strategy, which is not to say we shouldn't have a really strong child care subsidy system so that families have strong purchasing power in the market. And as you know, we are in the midst of the next phase of our cost study, which we fully anticipate informing that rate structure going forward. So we have also revised the recommendations not only to reflect the change in how we applied the rate increases, but also at your direction to include direction to the agency from the board in two areas. One is that we use information from the cost study this year to come back to you in 6 months with recommendations about changes to the regional rate structure. Some of the conversations and questions we've been having about the difference between cost versus rates across our regions, and being able to use this next phase of the cost study to figure out how to inform a rate structure that might provide greater adjustments that reflect the cost of care as well as the market. So we are, at your direction, would be bringing back recommendations around what we might be able to do in the immediate term around our rates. We have 6 regions that is selected by the agency, so we have some flexibility within, again, some requirements by the federal government that we do have rates and that we do have regions that reflect age groups and regional variations where justified. The second recommendation, and these are related, but as you know, this agency has been using the market rate survey of market prices as a way to set rates or inform rates. Over the last several years, the federal government is now allowing states to propose an alternative methodology. And I think what you heard from many of our public comments and many of you as board members, we think it's time to get away from the market rate survey as a way of exclusively setting rates. So we will be working over the next several years to develop that alternative methodology. It has to get developed and approved by our federal partners so that when we go to submit our next market rate survey or alternative methodology, that methodology can be developed and then actually implemented in time for us to submit that new study in July 2025, Carol? Yeah. So we have we can in the immediate term start working on our existing rate structure and think through and bring back some recommendations while we work on alternative methodology for the market rate survey going forward. Those are the revised recommendations for the board's consideration.
Comments, questions from the board? Feel free to jump in if you're on the phone.
Hey, this is Nikki. I'm on the phone. I just wanted to jump in and say, I know that we've had a lot of discussion about this and about alternative methodologies and everything, but I really don't want to lose the really historic kind of nature of what's happening here in terms of a 10% across the board increase is amazing. And the fact that that are using subsidies will be able to access 30% of spots across the state is really amazing as well. And these kind of investments in our providers will allow them to, to kind of sustain support that they need in order to increase, hopefully, rates that they're paying their own staffs. And so I just wanted to commend the department for digging deep and really figuring out how we can make this work in order to make this really sizable investment in our children and in our workforce.
Thank you,
This is
Nikki.
Carolyn. I just want to second what Nikki said and just thank the commissioner and her staff. I think that we recognize, that there's issues with the market rate survey, but we're stuck with it because that's our approved methodology. But looking at alternative methodologies on the go forward is something that we can and will do. But I do think that it's incredible news and, quite frankly, an unprecedented boost, much needed. So I just want to really thank the commissioner and her team for listening to us, but also just for the incredible work that went into all of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I will say it is a pleasure to be presiding over the largest, and obviously we have the legislature to thank for that and a lot of other support, but to be presiding over the largest rate increase that I think the agency's ever implemented is a very excellent opportunity for the agency at this moment.
Maria.
Grateful and excited about it. And you mentioned that we are going to aim for the same increase for the same amount for next year. We're going to propose the same amount of increase for next year, which it's, a huge opportunity to, if we are going to work on a new methodology, to reach as far as we can to change it and make up for the issues that the UC market rate this year will cause or will, worsen or, whatever the word is. And I apologize, words are not my thing sometimes.
Mitigate, yeah.
But I do feel that, 6 months might be a little too long as well. And I know I had a previous discussion about, or thought about that. It would be great if the new methodology can inform the budget instead of react to the budget once that process starts for the next fiscal year. So, and I'm wondering if we could work a little hard, a little faster, I guess. And I'm embarrassed to even say that because I do know how busy the department is, but I just feel like it would be a lot better if we could inform it.
So, I mean, recognizing the timeline in terms of informing at least the legislature's budget proposals, that the 6-month might not provide that. Perhaps we recommended the 6-month because it aligns with the timeline for the cost, this next phase of the cost study, but perhaps we could come back with some interim recommendations or updates along the way in terms of where we are in that process, if that suits the board.
That's great.
This is Carolyn. Sorry, this is Carolyn. I recognize that we always like to do things sooner than possible, but I think we also just have to be realistic of the constraints that we're under, where when federal approval is required to change a methodology that you're currently using, we really can't predict. So obviously we want to have the most robust timeline we can have, but we totally have to recognize that it's not within our complete control, and that's the reason that, the proposal is the way that it is from my perspective anyway, because it takes a lot of time to change things when it's been approved by the Fed to do something differently, that's all.
Yeah, and I think there's room for, some interim work to the commissioner's point. The cost work and the cost study are ongoing, and we've got a time frame of within 6 months. And I think this is a wonderful case to the commissioner's point, where the board and the agency are in complete agreement and aligned, and obviously data driven. So I appreciate the complexity all around and the spirit of moving forward. Secretary.
I also want to obviously thank the commissioner and the team for all the work in getting us to this point, as well as the board for their feedback in the field as well. I do think we're in a better place, and hopefully set up for even more positive change going forward. I also wanted to acknowledge that beyond the fact that this is a historic annual increase in provider rates, that is on top of actually some significant increases over the course of the last 8 years. I mean, I think in total it's been about $250 million in rate increases, and obviously since the beginning of C3, hundreds of millions of dollars in additional operating grants that have been provided to providers. That's not to say all is well and everybody's fine, but it is to say that there has been, I think as someone mentioned earlier, that we are sort of at a new moment in terms of financing of early education and care in Massachusetts, and the question is, our ability to sort of sustain that and pick up the momentum going forward. But I think there's really been tremendous change and investment that has been made over the course of the last several years, and this is an important piece of that.
Paul.
Not to keep repeating this, but I do think it's important.
I do too.
To take a moment and just say thank you to the administration for going back, right, and kind of taking the feedback and acknowledging what the questions we had, but also from the field, and it did come back better, I believe. And most importantly to me, we all know there's never going to be enough money, right? But to me, what's also important is the language in this vote, which is really to hold ourselves and the administration accountable to do the work that I believe many people in the field have been asking for a really long time. And so to me, that is the spirit of partnership that I hope we continue to work in, because I think it is a model. And so I would encourage folks in the field to continue to ask questions about how we can continue to make this better. To me, this is the type of work that lives in continuous improvement, right? Like, it's never going to be absolute, it's never going to be perfect, but we can always do better. And so just grateful for the partnership, for the opportunity to share space with everybody, to ask questions, and to have it come back in the way that it did, and hopefully position us to celebrate more in the future about really getting to the root of how we can support our providers across the Commonwealth. It doesn't matter where you live, but how we support our providers across the Commonwealth to deliver quality care to their families and to their children. And so grateful for the work that you all did in kind of going back and coming back to us.
Anyone else before I call the vote? Wonderful. Let me make the motion to comply with the FY23 line item language, federal rate reimbursement, and family access requirements, and provide much needed support and financial stability to early education and care providers across the state that the Board of Early Education and Care hereby approves the department's recommendations regarding the FY23 rate increase for providers of subsidized early education and care, subject to negotiation where appropriate. The board further directs the department to use information contained in the current market rate study and cost analysis to further assess the current regional rate structure and make recommendations to the board within the next 6 months. The board further directs the department to work with the Federal Office of Child Care to propose and develop an alternate methodology for determining market rates with the goal of using an approved alternative methodology for the FY 2025-2028 submission of the state's Child Care and Development Fund state plan. Could I have a second, please?
Second.
Thank you, Paul. Maria Moeller?
Yes.
Secretary Pizer?
Yes.
Paul Belcito?
Yes.
Jamila Lee?
Yes.
Maura Siegel?
Yes.
Allison Schoenwald?
Yes.
Carolyn Kane?
Yes.
Nikki Ruiz de Luzuriaga?
Yes.
So approved. Again, thank you. An entirely momentous occasion. Obviously, lots of work to do ahead that represents the frontier, but builds from tremendous investments and a moment where I hope it is understood that the board and the agency are working very hard in collaboration to place the workforce and in so doing, children and families at the center of the agency's work and the strategic work of the board. So thank you all very much. We're going to take a short break. We'll be back in 10 minutes. We'll resume at 2:30. All right, we're going to continue. Everybody on the phone, we're going to get started again. We're going to continue on the topic of financial assistance or subsidy, and we're going to turn now to this ongoing discussion about regulation revisions and, in the spirit of family access, modernizing processes, et cetera. So we're going to turn now to that item.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair. And I want to invite Joy Cohen and Rob Orthan to come up here, please, who are two of the members of the team who've been working on this. So I'll say I am so pleased to have presented and gotten your support on the rate proposal and to have the opportunity to implement that. And I am thrilled to present this package of considerations for regulation reform. As you know, we've been, since the spring, in sort of an end-to-end review of our child care financial assistance system, kind of looking under every rock and searching in every corner for what changes we might put in place that could improve the user experience, make it easier for providers, unburden some of our subsidy administrators. And today's package of proposed regulation reforms for consideration are the foundational element of much of that work. So I'm going to walk through sort of the process a little bit, and then I'll turn it over to my colleagues to walk you through some of the changes. But I wanted to start by just saying what we're trying to accomplish a little bit with these regulations. So I think Kim Dion said twice in her 2 minutes, very complicated system, very complicated system. And I think you heard that from some of our other speakers too. And I think what we're trying to do is understand where we have complications and where we don't need them. So the package under consideration for you today is really about, first and foremost, providing a level of dignity and respect for the families that are engaged in our system. We will walk through some of the language changes that we've made to remove some of the more punitive or harsh language and replace it with strength-based language that's intended to engage with families. This is a package of regulations that are about recognizing that the families we're working with are eligible for the services, and our job is to facilitate access to those services in every way we can to support their economic mobility. The package also represents modernizing parts of our system. So like any program, we needed to dust off the way we had our regulations written to get rid of things like wet signatures and in-person meetings and date stamps. That was one of my favorites. So there's a whole set of things that are about changing the family experience, changing the burden to be about the system facilitating access and supporting and facilitating for families, and then a whole set of things that are about modernizing. And part of the goal we have is, we have for several years reverted funds in our caseload accounts, and those are children and families that could be served. So a big piece of the work that we're doing here is just trying to bring down those barriers that might be getting in the way of kids and families accessing those services. Because every time we can't get someone off the wait list, or they're missing a piece of documentation that we don't necessarily need, or they can't take time off work to actually go to that appointment to reauthorize, that might be a job they're losing, that might be a training program they're not able to go to, it might be a college semester starting that they're not able to access. So these regs are about facilitating that family experience and economic mobility in the long run. And they form a foundational piece of what will be really an ongoing set of work to continue to reform and modernize policies, procedures. We've been, since the spring, as I said, engaged in sort of a very comprehensive look at where things are. We have 2 procurements coming up, both for the child care resource and referral agencies, and you heard our visioning sessions mentioned by one of the speakers during public comments. We're engaged in the community right now talking about the voucher system. Pretty soon we'll be doing the same thing on the contract system. And the regulations are the foundation for that work, and those new procurements give us tools to actually implement the changes that we're proposing. So we also launched the pilot, as we talked about, and you heard from Kim Dion about the work we're doing with the pilot, which is absolutely an iterative process. So we're out there in the field every day learning what barriers families are experiencing, what challenges the CCR&Rs are identifying that could make it easier for them to do work with us. And so those have informed. That work has also informed where we are on the regulation process. So the good news is we have kind of a lengthy process, so we'll have an opportunity to hear from folks. So today you are here. We are presenting kind of the package at a high level. We are intending in December to present you actually the red line version of our regulation. So we'll have time between today and next board meeting to hear from our community partners about the changes that we're proposing. The action we'll ask you to take in December is to send those red line regulations out for public comment, which is a 60-day period. So there'll be an additional time period by which we'll be able to hear from our community partners and from families about what they do or don't like, or whether we went too far or not far enough in certain areas. So very happy to be kicking off the process today to share where we are. We started with a set of guiding principles that not only inform the regulation changes that we're presenting for your consideration, but all of our subsidy work. You've seen these in one form or another over the last several months as we've been building to today, making sure they're family-centered, accessible and equitable, simplifying the process wherever possible. I know Kim talked about that too. We also want to bring innovation and technology. Technology exists to make it much easier to do work with us, and we should be using that. We also have a foundational principle of making sure wherever we're making changes, we're aligning where possible with other state agencies. Many of our families are involved with more than one state agency or might be receiving benefits from more than one state agency. So where we can line up rules and make it easier for them, submitting documentations, applying for benefits, we're looking at that in every change that we make as well. Finally, we've been doing this in quite a collaborative process, whether it's through the visioning sessions, collaboration and meetings with families, or through the pilot work with our CCR&Rs. And now I am very pleased to hand it over to Rob Orthman and Joy Cohen, who are going to walk you through sort of the set of changes that we'll be proposing to you in December.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner. Good afternoon, members of the board. So there are really 3 main goals, overarching goals with what we're trying to do. I should take the clicker first.
You drive.
Thank you. So there are 3 main goals that we are trying to achieve overall, and you can see the 3 in front of you as well as on the board. The first is really to increase the overall system efficiency. As the Commissioner mentioned, it can be a complicated system, and we're trying to make it as efficient as possible for those that use it, whether they're parents, CCR&Rs, our internal staff, et cetera. The second is to prioritize family needs and experience. We've been doing a lot of listening and we'll continue to be doing listening, particularly in the formal public comment period if the board chooses to move it forward to that. And then the third is to modernize and update the system, removing timestamps and some other basic things, as well as operationalizing for families that may be working more remotely consistent with the overall population. You'll notice there's a lot of overlap between these three. These aren't exclusive. Some of the changes we're looking at touch on all three. Some are on one, rather. But it's the idea is that all-encompassing these three main goals are really what we're seeking to achieve. And overall, there's 42 regulatory changes that are split up amongst the three categories, as mentioned, with significant overlap. And just to comment on how we're going to present this, the idea is we want to talk about each kind of category, or each goal, excuse me, in large themes. We're going to summarize what it is. There's a lot of detail that you have on the slides if you've already looked at it, or you can see it as we're presenting. Happy to, at stoppage points, talk about anything specifically in detail, but we want to provide kind of an overarching summary for everything we're doing. So the first goal is to, as I mentioned, to increase the overall system efficiency, and the three bolded items are really the key pieces we're trying to achieve. So streamlining and clarifying roles and responsibilities, that's the role of a parent, trying to remove some of the administrative and documentation burdens that may be on parents currently to make the process easier for them, as well as to clarify roles and responsibilities at the CCR level as well as the EEC staff level. Reducing the documentation burdens, there are a lot of documents, both literal paper as well as electronic, that we're requiring of families and parents. And we have pretty significant flexibility as to what we need to take in order to certify, the various things we need to meet for income eligibility as well. And so we are looking to reduce those burdens wherever we possibly can to make it as simple as we can. And the last, but certainly not least, is to use more inclusive and accessible language. I'm a lawyer, I read regulations, but I find them complicated, and if I find them complicated, then members of the public, I'm imagining, and parents may find them very complicated. So we are trying to make them as simple, as easy to understand as possible in the regulations, and then later in the subsequent policies as well. I am going to kind of not describe each one of these, but I'm just going to cycle through these, and again, happy to answer any questions you may have about anything specific as it relates to some of these. But as an overall, it's a couple of major touch points that are within this large category. So we're reducing reporting requirements. So right now, a family that experiences what's known as a temporary change, that is something that is not permanent. That is something that may be an illness of a family member they need to take time to care for. It may be they simply just moved to a different address within Massachusetts, but they're still within the state. Those kind of temporary changes, right now we're requiring a family to report them within 30 days. And particularly depending on the nature of the change, there could be a lot happening in that family or for that parent, and maybe their first thought is not to immediately report to EEC. So given that's not a federal requirement, we've decided to change that so that at the annual reauthorization, so that annual point where they have to recertify income and other metrics, at that point in time, we would have them report to us those temporary changes. And we think that will reduce just a lot of headaches that maybe families may be experiencing at certain points in their lives. Similarly, focusing on DCF families in particular. So we're creating seeking to create a post-transitional eligibility and priority for folks that are DCF-involved families. Those are families that are coming out of particularly, crucial circumstances. And so we want to prioritize their access to care coming out of that specific DCF referral and then entering into the larger income-eligible pool. One thing we're excited about is we're seeking to waive fees for homeless families. So there are a number of homeless families that are involved in referred to us, and we're seeking to waive fees across the board for those families. And then
we did look a little bit at the data, and I think families were paying about $8, and it just seems like we should be supporting our homeless families, maybe to be saving funds for additional things, and also save the paperwork and burden for both our subsidy administrators and our homeless families from actually assessing those fees. So yeah, we're pretty happy about proposing this change.
Thank you, Commissioner. And then just one of the last ones I'll highlight is removing the upfront deposit required on families as they're entering care, and also the requirement of first-of-week payments. We want to recognize that different families are in different positions financially as well as, and they can work with the programs to work out mutually agreeable schedules. That way we create flexibility on both ends. with that, I'm going to turn.
Let's just highlight the one on the bottom too. I wanted to mention around moving from weekly hours to average hours. Again, I think if we're talking about the experience of families whose hours may fluctuate, that making sure that we're basing it on sort of what type of care and how much care they might need to be based on a longer period of time than a single point of time. So I think that's an important change too. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm going to turn it over to Joy to take the next goal/category.
Thank you, Rahab.
And I'm handing you the clicker.
Oh, boy. Thank you. Okay. So I'm going to spend a little more time talking about the why behind this section, because this is really at the crux of what we're trying to do here, is a family-centered approach. And so I want to emphasize that we have made every effort to prioritize family needs here. And what we found is that EEC really needs to be prepared to hear and respond to families' pain points with solutions that will better allow EEC to better support families in understanding, navigating, and accessing the system. To prioritize the needs of all families, we would need to meet parents where they are and then stay with them, looking for opportunities along the way to introduce flexibility, more support, and more time. All of those things looking to make the biggest impact that we possibly can for families that are in need of affordable childcare for their children. So we did this in 4 ways, which are up on the screen, this approach. One is we looked for more opportunities to provide support throughout the process for families going through our system. And this is not only increasing support for things like application assistance, although that's included. It's also about the kinds of supports that pave a smoother path for families to achieve self-sufficiency and economic mobility. So, for example, we're looking to allow more activities to count as a service need, to give a little more options. So one example of that would be that we're looking to allow for advanced professional training or graduate school to count as a service need. We're looking to ensure that families have avenues to request an appeal of EEC's authorization decision regarding their disability status, making sure that families have the tools that they need to navigate the system successfully. We're also looking to find ways to alleviate more burdens on families. We've heard many times that the existing notification system was not sufficient, and that it does not lessen the chances of a family missing an opportunity to renew their financial assistance. Not only is this a challenge for parents, it creates interruptions in childcare arrangements and requires additional family resource and family time when they need to reapply to retain their benefits. So that's why we're exploring ways to increase the number, modes, and advanced delivery of notifications to families prior to the expiration of their financial assistance or prior to the denial of their financial assistance, to give enough information and enough opportunity for the family to participate. Snail mail, as the Commissioner mentioned, is no longer our only option now. Many families prefer and are more attentive to email, phone, and text. So we're going to look to take advantage of those mechanisms of communication and ensure that families are notified well in advance and through multiple channels prior to the discontinuation or other change in their financial assistance. One of the things that we're also focusing on, and I mentioned earlier about adding more time, we cannot unfortunately add more time in a day, but what we can do is expand some of our timelines to be a little more user-friendly. So one example of this is we're looking to expand the disability of the disability of parent service need to qualify for 3 years instead of 2 years, and removing the justification requirement at reauthorization that is needed to explain why the disability persists. This prioritizes family needs and experiences because it ensures that families are supported for as long as they need that support without the requirement to submit duplicative documentation, in order to continue with their financial assistance for childcare. And finally, we're really seeking opportunities to reduce rigidity and increase flexibility. We've been talking for a long time now, saying that COVID has changed the landscape of childcare, but COVID has also really changed the landscape of parenthood and what it means to parent. Parents have new challenges and different struggles, and it is absolutely imperative that our system is flexible enough to respond to these challenges. And that's why we're proposing to change what qualifies as a standalone service need to include domestic violence. And we're looking to propose to add maternity and paternity leave to the definition of protective services. We want to consider allowing the service need of disability of parent to be paired with education or work as a service need to allow the family to achieve a full-time service need for their child, and also looking to remove the 5-hour limit on travel time. So really responding to the current needs of families that have varying schedules and varying commutes, and really bringing this to real-time problem solving and solutions. So these are just some of the many ways that we're seeking to prioritize family needs and experiences through this reform effort.
Thanks, Joy. I just want to highlight a few of the other changes associated with families or parents with disabilities.
Sure.
So we have removed from the regulations this notion of incapacity of parent, which has been in there a long time and needed to be updated to reflect current definitions around disability and current language used by other agencies. Also, our families with a special need who are qualifying for services didn't previously have appeal rights if they were denied, which created a bit of subjectivity in the system. So we've built appeal rights in for families with that service need as well. So very proud of the work the team did around making sure we're supporting families with disabilities, both with sort of equity and modern language, but also recognizing that they also have economic mobility goals we should be supporting. So, thanks.
And I'll talk briefly about the last goal in grouping, which is to modernize and update the system. And so we're trying to improve alignment amongst the many regulatory frameworks and partner agencies and policies and procedures, and really, wherever we can, make sure that we're lining up correctly with other governmental agencies, particularly those that parents and families are interacting with. Similarly, we're trying to strengthen those kind of partnerships, including childcare-involved agencies, as well as individuals and entities in the field. And then lastly, there's been a number of COVID flexibilities that were put in place at the onset of the pandemic, and then were continued as it's developed. And we've evaluated those, and we'll be extending some of those, removing some of those, and updating some of those as it makes sense now in the somewhat different environment compared to where we were 2.5 years ago. Some of the ones I want to highlight in that regard. So we often have a situation where a family will have a service need, and they'll be qualified, income eligible, et cetera, but they may not have all their documentation, lined up at the point in time. Now, we're trying to obviously reduce that documentation, but there just still may be times where maybe they need some paperwork from HR or something from an educational institution, or regular things that folks need that we've all dealt with before. Rather than delay the process to get the child or children into care, which is the most important thing, be extending provisional authorizations. Currently, they're 12 weeks, so 3 months for a family to be able to get what they need, and then they can, if indeed they're able to, then they can be certified for a full year and enter the system. And that's just to prioritize the needs of children to get them into care.
Sorry, Rob. Any family who has either started a new job or tried to start a training program, we all recognize you can't do that if you have kids and can't enroll them in childcare first. So the provisional authorization is really intended to say, we recognize you're income eligible, we've been able to document that, you have a service need, but maybe you haven't started that training program or that job yet, but you can't really affect that change unless you have this sort of an employment readiness period to allow you to enroll your kids. So it's sort of really just recognizing how families need to access the system in order to support their work or school goals.
Thank you, Commissioner. We'll also be extending the amount of additional provisional authorizations that a family could receive from 2 to 3 as well, so I wanted to note that. Similarly, for families that may qualify but don't have an approved activity at the time of authorization, and by that I mean approved activity certified in the educational need or the work need, maybe they're trying to find work or something along those lines. We also will be extending provisional authorizations of 12 weeks and then potentially on top of that to families similarly, so that they have the child care, as the commissioner said, that they can then have that in place so they can find the work they need and find or meet the activity. One other change that I think we're excited about the regulatory level that is simple enough of changing one word, but I think will make a big difference for families is in terms of program violations or substantiated fraud. So obviously we have an obligation to the taxpayers of the Commonwealth to ensure that the funds are being used for the point of which they're allocated and that families are receiving the dollars they need. With that, we have to ensure that there aren't intentional program violations happening or there's even potentially substantiated fraud. We're clarifying the definitions of both to make it clear that these require intentional or willful acts on the part of a family or a parent. A simple mistake doesn't necessarily, it wouldn't qualify for either of those at this time. We see situations in the real world and in the field where for whatever reasons there may be errors made by unintentionally, there may be just honest mistakes, someone forgot to submit something paperwork, someone forgot to submit a change of address or something along those lines, and we want to ensure that if sanctions are needed, that they're done in an appropriate manner and based on intentional or willful acts of the families. So even though it has the word intentional in the actual term, we've added that, or we'll be adding that to the regulation, as well as substantiated fraud to that definition. And another thing that we're clarifying is self-employment. There are a lot of folks that are self-employed, and particularly over the last 2 years, many more have entered self-employment. Our regulations really haven't met that change in the reality. They've required a lot of onerous paperwork and frankly duplicative or unnecessary paperwork. So we're clarifying that the bare minimum documentation or information necessary to certify you are in fact self-employed, and then to kind of move forward with that as a qualifying service need for employment. Similarly, our regulations really didn't account for folks that may be at home having a normal workday over Zoom or over Microsoft Teams, which many of us are doing. So we're clarifying that that kind of work from home, whether it's self-employment or otherwise, is certainly meets the standards of a work service need. So it meets the reality of where a lot of folks are right now. And then one other thing I wanted to highlight was that changing or clarifying the definition of relevant income. So we right now, if you see the application, there are a lot of different forms of potential income that a parent or family has to alert us to. Some of those are obviously necessary and required. Others are not necessarily required under the regulations. And so we are clarifying in regulation and then subsequently in policy what specific income will be required so that we meet the standards and meet the minimums, but don't necessarily put overly burdensome requirements on families. So those are the categories. We have the timeline here, which I will turn back to the commissioner for, or I can do if you'd like. Whatever.
Sure. We can also open it up, but just to reiterate, I was saying in the beginning about the timeline and the opportunity for engagement. So throughout the sort of regulatory process between now and December, public comment, and then the real work is actually after the regs get put into place, because they are just a baseline framework. It's the policies and the procedures and the training and the change management and culture change that will accompany what follows the implementation of the regs. That is where we'll really see the change for families. And obviously we'll be able to do some of this work sooner than later, but it's part of a longer process in terms of the regulatory framework and making sure that we're training and putting policy changes in place at a pace that our field can accommodate. So we'll pause there for questions for the team.
Paul.
First of all, thank you. A lot of work here. Appreciate the month to kind of digest this, because I can't imagine what it went through to get to this point. But just curious, understanding the timeline, to me, this is about the people that live and breathe the current state of affairs. And so I'm just curious, I know Kim mentioned the pilot that's going on, but can you just let us know to what level current stakeholders have been engaged in this process, that KPMG is engaged in this process? It looks like there was envisioning sessions, but I just want to understand how the current users of the system have got us to this point, understanding that there's also kind of a place for input later on.
Yeah, sure. So interestingly enough, we actually began engaging on these efforts in 2021. We engaged a lot with providers that were providing subsidized childcare. We engaged with families at that point, and we engaged with EEC staff, and we identified similar pain points, so these are not new. Not all of them are new, I should say. With the current reform efforts, we are continue to actively engage through KPMG, like you just said, and looking to eventually have some solid data to support why we're moving in the direction that we're moving with these regulations, and be able to create opportunity to track some metrics as we move forward with the implementation, which is really the work ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
So I was just going to say, I think, there has been a lot of work both inside of EEC and external around the subsidy system in general, right? So
You can tell.
Right.
Yeah.
So we started with the foundation of the work the agency's been doing for several years to identify pain points and solutions. But there's also many reports that have been written about the child care subsidy system, both in Massachusetts and nationally, that have identified many of these kinds of important changes to put families at the center, to modernize, to get rid of some of the old feelings about how we engage with families as well. And all of that work has included sessions with providers, multiple sessions with the child care resource and referral agencies. We have been working with several partners around family engagement too, but that now we have a new team dedicated to that. We have an opportunity to further engage. We did meet with Nikki and talk with some of with Empath and working with her to engage families' voice in the process as well.
Thank you.
Just along those lines, wanted to encourage, I see the footnote about the dates of the public comment period and the possibility of extending, irrespective of whether you extend. Just wanted to encourage also that that's a moment for more buy-in, using that period to even further raise awareness, et cetera, so that can hit the ground running. Maura Siegel is trying to get in.
Thanks. Actually, so a couple comments and a request, if possible. First comment is, this looks amazing, and I'm just so grateful for the team's work centering on families and all of the engagement and stakeholder work you've done to get to this point. Very motivating and great to see. And then to the chairwoman's comment, the public, I know you see that December 14th to January 4th falls right in the holidays. I don't know if that was mentioned, but I guess a real plug for those listening and engaging, how important it'll be to really authentically hear comments at that stage. And I would anticipate maybe we need to extend it, just given the, who's paying attention in the middle of the holidays. So it'd be great to get as many comments as possible, as close to families as possible. And then I think one of the things as I'm listening to this that I'd love to see in December's board meeting is we're trying to become even more data-driven, and it would be great to hear, Commissioner, if we implement all of these over this period of time, we would hope to see movement on these three metrics, at the highest level, right? Like increase in participation, reduced time. What are those three metrics we'll want to see improvement on? And then even if you wanted to take a crack at what the actual targets would be, it would be great so that we could all kind of keep our eye on the prize of what ultimately we're trying to accomplish with these wonderful regulatory changes.
Absolutely. We'd be happy. We have identified metrics. They're just to hold ourselves accountable for that we would expect to see change. We don't have great data on the current state of those metrics, but we will bring those in December, and setting some targets in terms of improvement absolutely makes sense. So we will be glad to bring those. Sure.
This is really exciting. I think it actually sets a tone of really good intentions, flexibility from the department. It's just really refreshing, and I love that the intention of aligning too with other agencies to improve efficiency. I also appreciate that you are talking about implementing policy afterwards, because again, when you involve more than one agency, we have to be very clear about who does what to create confusion. But I think I really appreciate from somebody that works very hands-on with the field. It's very welcome. I think I definitely have some suggestions already, and great, all in the same spirit of good intention. But I especially welcome the teen parent recognition of increasing that age, and I think in terms of advocating a little more for them as well, communities like Lawrence and Springfield as well, actually, and other teen parent programs in the state. It feels like sometimes they're to consider a special population, but sometimes they're not. So with regards to fees specifically, so I'd like to see a little bit the why on that, or it could be something that definitely there's no control on it because it's some sort of a federal mandate. But some of this, just a quick word of caution, some of it is also, which I am completely in agreement with regard to flexibility for the families. When you put a lot of flexibility with parent fee payment for the families, obviously it creates a little bit of pressure on the agency or the organization to make sure that they collect those fees as part of the Iron Triangle, that they have to have full fee collection. But I don't doubt, obviously, that the department is going to work in collaboration with the program to make sure that there are systems to ensure that happens, and and that we can still work with families on that one. And I just want to thank you for listening to the field on those points, and aligning. Thank you.
Thank you. Great. Any other comments, Secretary?
Just quickly, and again, thanks to the Commissioner and the team for all the work, and in some ways getting back to Maura's question about how do we know whether this has an impact or what its success will be. And I obviously look forward to seeing the various metrics and targets that will be coming out of the agency shortly. But I do think, sort of stepping back, besides all the efficiencies and the just general approach to reducing the burdens on families and providers and R&Rs and everybody else who's responsible for operating the system, including the department, frankly. I think a critical goal here is to ensure greater stability in child care for the families and the children who are participating in the system. And then the second thing, which maybe has a longer time fuse, but I think is consistent with some of the work we've been doing around C3, is to reduce barriers to providers to participate in the subsidy system. And all of these things, including the waitlist management, all these things sort of go together and fit together, and hopefully will come together effectively over the course of time, sooner rather than later. But I think if we're able to create greater stability, in terms of care for children, and able to increase the provider pool, I think these have been a tremendous success.
And hopefully coupled with increases in rates, and perhaps recognition that programs, might need flexibility in terms of their scheduling sometime, might also come together to increase the pool of providers that are interested in participating in the subsidy system. Thank you, Secretary.
Great. Any other?
This is Nikki. Oh, sorry. This is Nikki just typing in to say I just want to commend the department again on this work. I really see this as a really important sort of shift in direction for the department, just in terms of the spirit of, seeing our goal as ensuring access rather than sort of policing who gets in. And I just think it's a really important shift, and a lot of the changes that are being proposed here are changes that myself and others in the field who work directly with low-income families have been pushing for many years, and so it's really wonderful to see a lot of the feedback that we've gotten from families sort of reflected in a lot of these changes. in terms of the simplification, the language changes, the new sort of proposed regulations and everything. And I just wanted to say that I hope that this will be sort of a step in a further journey, right, to continue to increase access and to continue to streamline the process for families to work toward a future where, you know, it's even better, even easier to access, even more seamless, even, you know, it puts the power more directly in the hands of the families themselves that are trying to access the care. So just want to say very, very well done, very excited to see all of these, looking forward to pouring through line by line with the folks that we work with, and continue to look forward to, you know, continuing this work alongside you all. So thank you.
Thank you, Nikki.
Yeah, this is Carolyn. Sorry, just want to also echo the thanks to the commissioner and her entire team for great job on the regulation revision. So thank you.
Thank you. There's a big team behind these two.
Thank you.
Also.
I believe it.
Very big team.
Well, we'll look forward to continuing the conversation next month. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our next agenda item is around the budget priorities, and I hope that the theme that is coming right through this meeting and over the last many is a partnership between the board and the agency and an organizing framework in the strategic plan. This is not the moment to create more priorities or more work necessarily, but to continue to double down on what matters the most and meets the moment. So what you'll see, what you have in front of you is a draft of a memo that would go from us to the secretary. The idea is that, you know, rather than get in the weeds of line items and amounts, rather have the board in a more directional relationship with the agency on how we might think about priorities for the budget. I hope nothing in the memo was a surprise. I think that would be a problem. But the idea was to really build on the learnings from the last couple of years, which were, of course, in the context of COVID, but also in the context of a strategic plan that had been just put into place and reflected a lot of priorities and desires for ways of working and going forward. Also wanted to leverage investments in the state's FY23 budget, of course, again, for continuity and for doubling down on the way that the agency is working and supporting the field. Wanted to certainly target urgent opportunities and challenges, and also continue to set the work and drive towards what is, you know, ultimately a strategic plan and a sort of organizing framework for how to think about the agency's many hats and many facets of work. So I'll turn it over to the commissioner to walk us through in a little more detail, since this reflects this kind of collaboration.
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Chair. No surprises, really. Again, as the chair said, organized by the strategic framework, included in the strategic action plan, starting with expanding access. We know we're not reaching all the families who are currently eligible, and we're going to make it much easier for them to access the system, but we are still only reaching a portion, and we have seen the waiting list, which is far from perfect, and we're doing a lot of work on that, but increase over the last 6 months from about 16,000 to about 20,000. So we know there's a great need out there for families in terms of accessing child care financial assistance for their economic mobility goals. So priority one, or recommendation one, is to increase access to financial assistance for eligible families. The rate structure reform is here as likely as we develop those recommendations within the next 6 months with interim reports. There may be indeed costs associated with options the board wants to consider, so including that here. As we work on the educators, again, connected directly to the work that our work group is doing, the immediate work around our elevating the field, public information, family child care providers in the pipeline, and then the longer term work, thinking about credentialing and certification processes, really the urgent immediate needs on workforce, and also the longer term work to set up that structure that professionalizes and hopefully links compensation to the field. It has been our thought that we would be tapping into that workforce, the Workforce Trust or the Early Education and Care Trust. At the writing of this slide, it was at 175, and as I mentioned earlier, awaiting governor's action on that, but anticipating an increase in that trust fund. One of the things that was piloted through this year that we are working on right now about how to implement is using access to early education and care financial assistance as a recruitment and retention tool for the field. So not just early educators, but anyone working in early education and care staff. So we have $10 million in the FY23 budget that we're working on implementing and anticipating that is a really important recruitment and retention tool, recommending expansion of that pilot into next fiscal year. With a focus on programs, top of our list is continuation of the Commonwealth Cares for Children, or C3 grant program, under the current structure and financing as we continue to learn and put together that broader financing strategy that brings rates and operational grants and facilities support and other supports into the field to think about what is that picture that creates a truly stable, thriving early education and care sector for the educators and teachers and for the families. Some of the proposals that the Secretary talked about that didn't quite make it through this year that we've been promoting as an administration around family child care support and home ownership, so an improvement program there, a dedicated pool of funding. That was a proposal the governor put in, but we haven't seen come to fruition yet. You know, we've been running since 2013 a capital grant program for our center-based programs, and we know that in the current data that family child care provider is actually increasing in terms of coming into the licensed provider world at a more rapid rate than center-based, which was the opposite pre-COVID. So we have a lot of families who are working from home or working hybrid and maybe wanting to take advantage of family child care as a key. And we want to be supporting our family child care providers both on the capital side as well as on innovation and thinking about the role they play in community economic development, and also supporting mostly women-owned small businesses in communities. We have also been talking a lot about school safety initiatives in the early education and care setting, a hard subject, but critical for us as there hasn't been dedicated resources both to support programs in terms of planning for emergency preparation, but also what physical changes they might need to make to their spaces to support emergency planning and preparation. So whether it's security or training, obviously planning for active shooter or emergency situations with young children is very different than it would be in the elementary or K-12 system. So we think there needs to be a targeted investment and strategy for working with our early education and care programs around school safety. We also, the governor proposed earlier in the year, really an innovation fund that would help us think through, you know, families' lives are changing. We have many industries like trades and healthcare that work on non-traditional hours, retail, food service, that if you don't have access to childcare in those non-traditional hours, that whole opportunity is off the table for you. So creating an innovation fund that might bring new ways of early education care being delivered in ways that meet the way families live and work now. Finally, we would like to continue to build the skills and talent at the agency to deliver, as I said at the beginning, on both our core services, but also on the many priorities and growth areas that the agency has undertaken and been lucky enough to be funded to support. And that requires people to be able to implement it, and talent, and also upgrades to our information technology systems to be able to make sure we're delivering it in as modern a way as possible. So continuing support for the agency's capacity building across areas. And those are the 9 recommendations that are included in the memo to the Secretary.
Comments, thoughts, questions?
I think they're on point. Definitely exciting. I guess my only recommendation would be is as we get more granular into the year and into budget lines to reconcile it with some of the recommendations from the Early Education and Care Economic Review Commission. So those were a great amount of field work went into that, and I think they have high legislative support. So it's a good opportunity to just fit in a lot of those recommendations here.
Yeah, we might, oh, yeah, go
Follow
ahead.
up on that? Just, I thank you for raising that. The, you know, the $175 million, which may become $490 million, I guess, in some ways is a fund designed to support those recommendations, some or all of them. You know, I think the way it's designed, it could fund other things that weren't recommended in that report, including potentially some things here, but all of them would require additional appropriation, if I'm not mistaken. So we shouldn't assume that, oh, we've got $175 million sitting right there already, and it's soon to be 490. The funds are essentially set aside to enable appropriation by the legislature out of that fund to support these initiatives and, in theory, others as well. It, you know, certainly is a hedge also against any downturn in state revenue which may occur, which may create some shortfalls. But, you know, the intention is for these funds, which are part of the overall surplus that has been generated over the course of the last year or so, to be, and there were previously sort of in a reserve, a general reserve, to be specifically allocated to early education, which is, again, a great vote of confidence and a great resource, but one that we're going to have to continue to work with the legislature to actually apply.
Thank you. Yeah.
Anything else from folks? Anybody on the phone? Okay.
This is Laura. I do have a question. I'm looking at the incentivizing innovation under program establishment innovation fund, but I'm sorry, I might have missed this, but that money didn't get passed? Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. So then the 175 million in the workforce is also for spurring innovation. I don't know, it's almost like innovation, innovating around new models and new ways of doing things and new ways to support our educators. It's sort of in and of itself with its own effort. We do have a pool, it sounds like, to draw from, but they don't necessarily have. I'm just trying to understand sort of, I think we want to be operating today and tomorrow, but laying the groundwork for sort of completely new ways of thinking about how to support the sector. And so is it right that that 175 million is our source for doing that across the sector for the year ahead? Is that how we should be thinking about it?
More, this is Jim. Maybe yes, maybe no. Again, I think the legislature could allocate funds from that pool for those purposes, but that's, you know, that's a conversation that's going to have to happen. So if they were to, you know, support the recommendations that are in this memo, they could appropriate additional funds, you know, through the annual budget process for example, the Innovation Fund, or they could draw down some of the 175 million. Kind of that would be at their discretion.
So we've never had a trust fund like this before, and so as the secretary said, it is set aside and dedicated to the agency, but it is not within our budget to be able to spend out of it unless the legislature approves and takes action to allow us to do that. So. So I think it is our intention that in working with the board, we would develop key strategies and initiatives that we would like to see funded out of that, and work in partnership with the legislature to fund those, should those be consistent with their goals.
But if a separate innovation fund was funded, it'd give you more control internally, right? Right.
The original design of that innovation fund is that it would be sort of run out of the department as an opportunity to build new, sort of incubate ideas around innovation. They certainly wouldn't need to be mutually exclusive, but.
Yeah, I could also imagine maybe that we sharpen incentivizing innovation and name that that's about childcare models and delivery right? There's workforce, there's the Economic Review Commission, et cetera. This seems very particular to me. It's about content expertise, it's about the agency itself, and incentivizing new ways of thinking and doing. Yeah. Okay, that's helpful. Any other comments, questions from folks?
Just the last slide was just reminding everyone where we are.
Where we are on timing.
In that wheel of the budget process.
No. And maybe I should also say, so we have this, weird process whereby you are voting to give me the memo, which I already have in my hand, in order to introduce it into the governor's budget process, which is now underway for this current governor, but as I think we all know, this is election day, and in a couple of months there will be a new governor. So I guess all I can tell you is I will work with this memo and these recommendations as part of the current governor's maintenance budget process, and will ensure that my successor and the next governor is also well aware of the recommendations here.
My only comment is whether you look at the annual report we did at the beginning of the meeting, looking back, or the budget here looking forward, and everything we did in between, like, you really can see, I know I can see it really stitching together in a really amazing way as we kind of create the roadmap going forward. So just want to send an acknowledgement to you and to the team here and to the team behind the team and et cetera. This has been a robust agenda today on some pretty substantial things, and I think the budget here reflects that on how we kind of put that into action going forward. So nice work.
Mm-hmm. I also think that when you don't have to spend a lot of time on the budget items, it suggests exactly that, which is there's momentum, there's clarity, there's alignment, and we look ahead and we keep going in a lot of respects. Any last comments? Okay. We have one last final item, which is that last month.
Do you have to vote on the memo?
No, we're not. We don't vote on it.
Okay. Then I will take it.
You can vote on it, but you are not required to vote on it.
All right.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you for taking it.
You're welcome.
Last month, we heard about some proposed regulation revisions to the Early Education and Out-of-School Time Capital Grant Program, another sort of example of some COVID-era learning that was certainly worth getting into getting out of crisis and into regular business. And so we were walked through those changes, and then they went to public comment.
Great, so I'm going to turn it right over to Neil Flynn, who's been leading this work for us, to talk to you a little bit about what we heard and where we're headed.
Great. Excuse me. Great. Thank you very much, Commissioner. Good afternoon, members of the board. It's nice to see you again. Last month, EEC presented regulatory revisions to support a modified round of EEOST Capital Fund grant awards for fiscal year 2023, similar to the modified rounds of fiscal year 2021 and fiscal year 2022. As the slide shows, the revisions continue to allow the Commissioner to change the length of the grant period, change the timetable for grant recapture, waive the requirement for a recorded land use restriction, and waive the requirement for a recorded mortgage lien. After the board's approval in October, EEC solicited public comment. We received one public comment from the Alliance of Massachusetts YMCAs. The Alliance supported the proposed amended regulations. In addition, the Alliance supported the agency's ability to administer modified rounds in perpetuity. That is the only public comment we received. So I guess in closing, on behalf of the agency, I ask for the board's final approval of the proposed amended regulations, and I also ask that the board authorize the Commissioner to file the proposed amended regulations with the Secretary of the Commonwealth for promulgation.
And
Thank
just
you.
to be in outside of motion language, really what we're asking you is to allow us to keep the grant sizes smaller, because that has allowed us to make sure that we're supporting a number of projects that in the beginning were COVID-related, about opening windows and HVAC systems and playgrounds and how we are living and working now. And there's been a huge demand and a benefit to us keeping it at that smaller size. So doing that, and also in the current environment where it's very difficult to find a contractor, supply chains are interrupted, that it extends the timelines for programs to be able to, allows us the opportunity to extend timelines by which funds can be expended, so that we're recognizing kind of those disruptions and changes for the providers who are receiving capital grants from us. So, but Neil did the technical part.
Comments, questions before we vote? Okay, thank you. Certainly,
Thank you, Neil.
certainly
Thank you very much.
excellent all around, as we talked about last month. So I'll make the motion that the Board of Early Education and Care, in accordance with General Law, Chapter 15D, Section 3F, having solicited public comment as required by General Law, Chapter 30A, hereby approves 606 CMR 15, the proposed amended regulations governing the early education and out-of-school time capital fund program, that the board also authorizes the Commissioner of Early Education and Care to file the proposed amended regulations with Secretary of Commonwealth for publication in the Massachusetts Register as 606 CMR 15 in accordance with General Law, Chapter 30A. Could I have a second, please?
Second.
Thank you. Jamila Lee?
Yes.
Paul Belcito?
Yes.
Secretary Pizer?
Yes.
Maria Moeller?
Yes.
Allison Schoenwald?
Yes.
Maura Siegel?
Yes.
Nikki Ruiz de Lizarriaga?
Yes.
And Carolyn Kane?
Yes.
Thank you. Approved. Excellent.
Thank you very much.
Okay, the board will now meet in executive session to discuss strategy related to pending litigation, the Echeverria matter. The board has determined that discussing this matter in open session will have a detrimental effect on the litigation position of this body. The board will not reconvene in an open meeting following the conclusion of executive session, and instead will adjourn directly from the executive session. I will now call the roll of the board to convene the executive session. Jamila Lee?
Yes.
Paul Belcito?
Yes.
Secretary Pizer?
Yes.
Maria Moeller?
Yes.
Allison Schoenwald?
Yes.
Carolyn Kane?
Yes.
Maura Siegel?
Yes.
Nikki Ruiz de Lizarriaga?
Yes.
So at this point, the open meeting is concluded, and I excuse all members of the public. Thank you again for coming. To the folks at UMass and the Springfield office for hosting us out here. It's been a fabulous afternoon. Thank you.
And please take some treats with you. Do not leave those for this board.
Who's responsible for this? This was very kind.
And also to the
Oh,
Springfield office for our Western Mass welcome packets.
Oh, lovely.
Thank you.